Hey all, Tom Moran here from Tom's Big Spiders. Well, a lot of you have been asking for many years now for me to do an update on my Grammostola iheringi. Well, we're going to go ahead and rehouse my girl into a different enclosure. Basically, the one we have her in, and I'll explain this a little more in the video, is fine. I just want to try something different because I've noticed she's become a bit more skittish after her last molt and seems to like to use her burrow more. So we're going to try to give her some more room to burrow. So know that sometimes there isn't a perfect enclosure. It's just what fits your needs. Or some of us, we like to experiment with different things to try to make sure that the spider is as comfortable as possible, and that's what we're doing here. So enough of me talking, let's take a look at Grammostola iheringi, or the Entre Rios tarantula. All right, so we're about to rehouse my Grammostola iheringi, or iheringi, or Entre Rios. I got this one here, and I'm going to open it up. I'm going to explain a bit about Temperament at the end of this video, but I want to make sure this girl doesn't freak out because, as I'll explain in a minute, I took her hide away from her. But I got this one as a 2 3/4 inch sexed female way back in March 2014. I was actually shocked to see how long I've had her. And at that time, I obviously got her a little bit larger, so I did not raise her up as a sling. I want to make that very clear. But when I got her, one of the things that impressed me about her is, as a Grammostola species, most of my Grammostolas take forever to grow. This one was already obviously well started, but she molted 2 times within a year. I was actually shocked by the second one because she molted. I figured, okay, it's going to be a couple of years before she does it again because she put on some decent size, and then she molted again. So one thing that differentiates the iheringi from other Grammostola species is the fact that most folks report really good growth rate. I mean, medium. Some folks have even told me they've gotten one up from a sling all the way up to a 3-inch specimen in a couple of years. So that's really good growth rate overall. So we'll call it medium, but just know this is a faster growing Grammy. And when I first got her, one of the things that also impressed me about her was her feeding response. She was not only an eating machine, but she would also chase down crickets almost like a Formictopus species. I remember the first time I fed her, I dropped a cricket and she missed the cricket, almost came out of the enclosure. I've never seen a response like that with a Grammostola sprinting across the enclosure, trying to grab a cricket and almost coming out because she's doing it with such gusto. So that always impressed me. And then early on, for many years, she was a very laid back spider, but we're going to revisit that in a minute because there have been some behavioral changes since her last molt. So if Billy wants to back up for a second, what we have her in here, as I put this cap on, she seems to be rather calm right now, but again, she's just kind of in the corner like, please leave me alone. What we had here, I got this one from Target several years ago. It was a Karton storage box. It's 15.7 inches by 13.1 inches by 6 inches. And it's funny because I went back and rewatched this video to get the details. And in the video, I was talking about the fact that the enclosure I had her in, which at the time was one of the Tera breeding boxes, the plastic breeding boxes, I mentioned the fact that she was doing just fine in that. I just wanted to try something different. Well, after keeping her in this for several years, I've decided I'd moved away from these. The good news was they were fairly inexpensive. There's good floor space on it. So for a true terrestrial species, a lot of floor space. But the bad news, they're also fairly clear compared to like Sterilite containers. The bad is that they're a bit too shallow. You can't put in a lot of substrate. And if you do try to put in a lot of substrate, they're also very flimsy, which I didn't like because I had another species in here that every time I'd pick it up, it would be like an earthquake. It would scare the spider. The lids don't fit securely. Like they could easily, a spider that was intent on getting out could easily push through the lid, and you either have to stack them on top of each other. So what I do is stack them too deep. And then on the top ones, I would put this bungee cord. Now, it worked well for many years, but I noticed that this one, because her temperament has changed a bit after the last molt, I want to try something different. And basically, she has become much more skittish. Most of my videos, I make sure to tell people that not only can temperaments vary from specimen to specimen, so I may have a really laid back one, somebody may have one that's a little more high strung, but it can change from molt to molt. That's why when people tell me they've tamed down their spiders and they're handleable, be careful, because this one would be a spider that somebody would probably consider to be handleable early on. After her last molt, she became very skittish, and basically anytime I touch her enclosure, she would bolt to her hide. Now, as for why her hide isn't in here, I should have recorded this. I'm kicking myself for not recording this, but Billy was downstairs working. I usually do this stuff before she gets up here to record. And what I decided to do was take out her old piece of cork bark, which I figured would be familiar. She's got webbing on it, and use it to create the new area in here where she can burrow. However, when I grabbed this with the tongs and pulled it up, this sheet of webbing came up with it. So rather than pull the webbing off of it, what I did was just kind of trim it a little bit here. So I took a pair of scissors and I trimmed it. You can see where the edge is nice and cleanly cut. Still got some of the leaf litter underneath. I kept that and then trimmed it a little bit over here and put the webbing in so it's almost like a nice web carpeting. So I'm hoping what I found with many of my heavy webbing species that when you put them into a new enclosure and you bring in some of the old webbing, it seems to bring a little bit of security. They seem to recognize there's some familiarity with it, and a lot of them will use that to start webbing from. In this case, I hope that what you'll have is a nice space. It'll kind of be reminiscent of her old enclosure. Now, I'm obviously anthropomorphizing here. I just think it comes down to they sense stuff in the webbing that makes them recognize this is mine. And hopefully this will be a nice place for her to go and bolt to. This was one of the main reasons I wanted to rehouse her, not because she wasn't doing well in here, but I wanted to give her that opportunity to be able to burrow. So what we have her in here is one of the 12 by 12 by 12 by 12 Exo Tera Nano Cubes. It is, I think, 30.5 centimeters cubed. We have the substrate. I don't know if it'll show on the side, but what I tried to do, because this is a species from Brazil, and I have always given mine a moist spot, and during the winter months, she will congregate around the moist area and around the water dish. Down here, I put quite moist substrate, packed it down really tight. Then on top of it, I had some slightly moist substrate, and then on top of that, I did the dry stuff. So what this does is allow the spider to come up, go into this burrow here, and if she detects that moisture and she wants that moisture and craves that moisture, she can dig down to get to this stuff here where it's nice and moist. So I'm hoping to see more burrowing. We'll see. I will say we're batting about 50-50 recently on spiders that I've rehoused into deeper enclosures so they can burrow. Half of them have burrowed, the other half have not. One of the ones I want to do an update on is my T. albipilosis, who has done quite a bit of digging in hers and definitely has created quite a nice burrow. And then we have New Zealand long-grain sphagnum moss. We have some leaf litter just to make it pretty. It's an aesthetic choice. And then we have a water dish. I did scrub the heck out of this. This stuff is like on there and won't come off. So it is a clean water dish. It's been disinfected. It's just I can't get that stuff off. So what we're going to do now, we're going to try to get her from here to here. What I'm going to use... I may use the round catch cup for this one only because it'll be easier to get her out in here, but if not, we'll go for Simply Limeade. Still haven't gotten my endorsement from Simply Limeade. They're missing out. A lot of people, because of this running joke, and just for people that are uninitiated, haven't watched my videos, I've been using these for years. I love them for catch cups, and I've been joking that they're going to give me some type of sponsorship. In actuality, it's never going to happen, but I have some people that come on, I think they take me seriously. It's a joke.
It's just delicious.
It's delicious. I love the stuff, and I would take money to show it. No, I'm just kidding. I would not take money. That's not what we do this for. All right, so what we're going to do is drop this right over her here. And fun fact about hair kicking. Obviously, they have urticating hairs. When I started taking the stuff out of this enclosure,
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Because you were just touching the
Oh no!
there.
Thankfully there's absolutely. I don't even think she kicked hairs or kicks hairs when she molts, because I was in here. I took the thing out. All the webbing came out. I'm picking up the webbing. I'm cutting. I'm like, oh god, I didn't put gloves on. And luckily, fortunately for me, it did not. There doesn't seem to be any webbing on it or hairs on it. So. No, this one's never flicked at me. I've never seen anything. If anything, she runs. And that's one thing that should be stated about these guys compared to other Grammostola species. They are much faster than most of them, or at least more prone to bolting.
Aww.
Yeah.
She's so cute.
Big girl. I don't know if you can see how she's not stretched out there. And she's a pretty good sized girl. So what we're going to do, I think, is... If you hold it up, she'll go up. Let me see if I can get this out. I have hard time. Some of these latches do not want to unlatch. I want to direct her right into here. Unfortunately, we're not going to get good shots of her, but I'd rather...
I did earlier.
Okay, good. Boom.
Aww.
That's exactly what I was looking for. And hopefully what she's feeling is that webbing beneath her, like, oh, hey, wait a minute, I'm home. And no, I don't believe she really thinks that. You got to be very careful with the anthropomorphizing. I think we all do it to an extent, but it can be dangerous when people do it, overdo it. So as she is in here, a couple notes about, as we mentioned before, this is my poster child for temperaments may vary from molt to molt. She was very, very laid back. And honestly, she behaved herself beautifully there. But this was a spider that I will show some old footage probably here, that she would just sit there. She would eat in front of me. She would almost like a pet rock, except much more animated when she was eating. And then after that last molt, she'd become much, much more skittish. Again, no hairs kicked, no threat postures, no defensive type. She's not standing her ground. She would run to her burrow. And that's what got me thinking. A couple times she would run to her burrow. There was really no substrate for her to dig into, and the back was open. So I felt like she was more exposed. So this, I think, as I drop the top of that in the background, this, I think, will provide her a much better avenue to be able to dig deeper if she wants and be able to conceal herself when she's, scared or threatened. Because again, it's about making the spider as comfortable as possible. As far as temperatures are concerned, this is a spider that I got back in the days when my tarantula room would sometimes in the wintertime be in the high 60s, very low 70s. She did, as I mentioned, we got her in March. So in March, she molted very quickly where it was still cold in the tarantula room. And then she molted again during the summer. And then I believe it was like only a year and a half later, she molted again during those colder temperatures. Obviously, higher temperatures can lead to faster metabolisms and faster growth rate, but this is already a fairly fast growing species. Now, I've heard that these guys can reach 8 inches or so. And when I first got them, they were often discussed as one of the biggest Grammostola species out there. Mine right now, this one is probably a solid 7 inches or 18 centimeters. I think her last molt was around 6.5 inches or 16.5 centimeters. So she is a big girl. And as hopefully what came out and you got a shot of, is that they're a little more leggy than some of the more heavy-bodied Grammostola species. So that's something that kind of differentiates them from the other Grammostolas. The colors have to be, when they're younger, there is almost a bluish hue to their overall body coloration, which contrasts beautifully with that bright red abdomen. Later on, as in between molts, they darken out until they get to be that kind of smoky gray-black that you saw before. Either way, they're gorgeous. I will get pictures of this one, hopefully next time she molts, so that you can see the blue. Last time she molted, she did have that blue for quite a while, and then it kind of fades out. Either way, beautiful spiders. And the butts stay much brighter red than the other species. Grammostola action is one that gets confused with these quite a bit. They look very, very similar. From what I've gathered, the action is a little less vibrant in the abdominal area, especially as they get older. Those abdominal hairs aren't quite so bright red. But as adults, they also are a little bit smaller than this species and slower growing. So I've heard action overall, smaller spider, slower growing, and much less vibrant, especially that overall base color. They don't seem to get that blue that these guys get, and their hinds tend to dull out a little bit. So I hope this satisfies. I've had a lot of people asking me about this species and about doing an update, and I had already kind of planned on doing a rehousing for them. So I'm glad I could finally show it off. One more thing before we go. Obviously, this one needs a lid, and I've been waiting to show these off. I got sent these by the folks at Tarantula Cribs. Obviously, always on the lookout for replacement lids for the Exoteras. Now, for folks who aren't aware of this, the Exoteras come with screen lids. It drives me nuts because people say this can't happen, because what will happen is people will keep spiders for a while and they won't see it, or it doesn't happen to them. It doesn't happen to every single spider, but some of them, if they climb, their toe claws can be wedged in the top of it. And I've heard folks say it's only terrestrials. I've seen it happen with terrestrials twice. One was with Lazarus, my Brachypelma boimi. The other one, I can't remember which species it was, but it also happened to one of my arboreal species. I also had it happen to one of my arboreal species. She climbed up, she got her toe claws. I found her dangling from 2 of her legs. So that's why a lot of us replace these lids with either drilled plexiglass. There's a couple companies making replacement lids now. Tarantula Cribs has made this one, as my hands are obviously all sweaty and clammy. That's nice for the camera. What are you gonna do? The acrylic lids, the first batch I got had a ring of ventilation holes around the side. This newer batch I got has holes through the whole thing. This is what I would recommend, because I do think there's not a lot of ventilation in these. There's ventilation under the doors here, so you want to be careful to keep those clear. Ventilation on the top. If you have a fan going into your room, this will help circulate airflow. But these fit in really well. The first batch was a little tight, and that's the biggest problem I have with the ones. You can take the frame out of the ones that come with it and replace the screen with drilled plexiglass. It's kind of a pain in the butt, and getting that back in here is usually ridiculously tough for some reason. But this one here, you just pick up this, boom, got it up. This is, be careful, it's not quite as grippy as I would like it to be, but you just can't rip the thing up. Just very slowly, this on, pick it up, boom. But very nice, clear, well ventilated, no chance of the spider getting its toe claws caught in it, because I'm telling you, it happens. I've had people send me pictures of it. They can also chew at it. Does it happen all the time? No. So it's one of those risk versus reward. If you want to take the chance and not do it, that's fine, because it's one of those things. Does it happen all the time? No. Is it rare? Probably. But I think for those of us that have seen it happen, we decide we don't want to see it again. So there we go. We have the whole enclosure set up. I will obviously be updating people. What I want to do is, I've done a bunch of rehousings lately, especially with some of the beginner species. This could be considered a good beginner species. I think the fact that they grow rather quickly as slings, they're much more readily available now, and they can be rather laid back overall. I think they're a step away from a GBB in terms of speed, so a little slower than the GBB, but they are a little fast, but very, very hardy spiders. So I think this one could make a good beginner species. And what I will do is, down the road, we will do an update of all the ones I rehouse to see which ones actually use the extra space and did some burrowing, and which ones did. So there we go. Grammostola iheringi, one of my favorites. I absolutely love this girl, and I still can't believe I've had her for 10 years. So obviously, I will keep folks updated. I'm curious to see whether she does any digging or if she just uses what she already has there. With the webbing so far, we put her up on a shelf. She came out, turned around. She's sitting right at the edge of the webbing, so it seems to have made her a little more comfortable. I don't expect a whole heck of a lot more webbing out of her. This was something that she had worked on for quite some time in the enclosure that she was in, but we'll see where it goes there. And then I just want to point out the fact that obviously I was handling the old substrate with my bare hands, which was not a very bright move, although there doesn't appear to be any urticating hairs in it, which for those who aren't aware, a lot of the New World tarantulas have urticating hairs or bristles on their abdomens that they kick them off in way of defense. They can be very itchy. They can burn your hands. I'm not feeling anything right now, so apparently there weren't any in there, but that is kind of not the norm. Normally, when you rehouse a New World species, even if they're not hair kickers per se, a lot of them will kick down hairs before they molt. They'll kick hairs into the substrate around them, and when you stick your hands through it and put your hands in that substrate, you get those hairs in your fingers, and it doesn't feel good. So I definitely should have had gloves. So full disclosure, don't emulate what I did here. It was a bonehead move. I should have had gloves on. That would have protected my hands and made sure I didn't get hair, because had there been a bunch of urticating bristles in that substrate, I would not be very happy right now. So that will do it for this one. As always, if you liked it enough to subscribe, very much appreciate. Click the circle up there. I'll put the other two iheringi videos over here. If you take the time to comment, I'll take the time to respond. Just know it can take me a little while. Guys, that'll do it for me. We'll catch you in 2025.